Hi everyone, Mira Reisberg here with Shirin Shamsi, who has just been cracking me up and making me laugh so bad this morning. Uh, but we're going to be talking about writing Muslim children's books, Muslim and Pakistani, and connecting your heritage. If you're interested in faith, look at the things behind her on the wall there. It says faith, family, friends. And Shireen is a former student. She's now published how many books?
13.
Oh my God. It's
But
pretty,
that includes the educational curriculum.
but that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah, I always knew she'd be successful, and she is, and it's so wonderful. And her books are exquisite. They're really, really beautiful, beautiful use of language, beautiful stories, and also somewhat subversive and radical, especially this one, which I hope you folks will buy. The Moon from Dehradun, and it's just, is it Dehradun?
Dehradun.
Dehradun. And so we've got that lovely moon and Dehradun, and you know, it's just gorgeous. And it's really, it's just a really special book, and it just tells it like it is, which is, yay, I'm so thrilled to see that, and I'm thrilled that they published it too. Um, anyway, I'm going to let you talk, and I'm going to turn off my video. And Shirin, can you share your experience of writing the books that you do and how you draw from, your family heritage and your faith?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Mira. And I would not be here today if it wasn't for your knowledge and your teaching and your generous heart. So I can't tell you how grateful I am to you. All these books that you see behind me that I've written, I wrote in your class. Like, for example, The Moon from Dehradun. I took a class with you and I started writing it um, in that class, and I completed it during the class. And it was a story from my family history, my mother's story. But I had always avoided writing it because it was so painful to me. But the tools that I gained from your teaching helped me to overcome my fear of writing a difficult subject, and I wrote it, and it was through this book that I got an agent as well. So I'm really grateful for that. So The Moon from Dehradun is based on my mother's childhood experience of the partition of 1947, when the British left India, and they divided it into three different pieces, and which later became Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. And the story, of course, is such a heavy and traumatic story. So I needed to tell it through the eyes of a child. And so I used Azra, which is also my mother's youngest sister's name, who passed away quite young. I wanted to use her name. And so it's about a girl who has a doll that she's very attached to. And her father comes home one day and he says that they have to leave right away. And so the family flees. But in the chaos and the in the whole state of affairs, she forgets her doll. And then when she does remember that she's forgotten it, it's too late to turn back. And so we're going through Azra feeling the loss of her doll, and then we see the bigger picture of them losing their home and having to flee for their lives overnight. And I really appreciate the illustrator, Tarun Lak, who is of Indian heritage. He has just created such powerful and moving illustrations. And then there are endnotes which give more details of the partition. And what amazed me was, and what also encouraged me to write this story, was the fact that so many people had not heard of partition. And that was really surprising because it's history's largest forced migration, where 15 million people lost their homes, and yet it's not very well known, and that's because the stories haven't been told, and we need those stories. And I'm really grateful that Athenaeum Books for Young Readers, an imprint of Simon and Schuster, took this story on and published it, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. And I also really like the way you've got that circular element where the new home that she moves into, she and her family, the child, they've obviously been forced to flee as well. And the child has left their doll. And it's really powerful. And I know I'm going to be really naughty, and I'm going to read a little from the end notes because I was so shocked and delighted to read this, because part of my work in helping people make and publish books is helping to make a better world and helping with, aspects of truth and multiple voices and all those kinds of things. So here's what Shirin wrote. Pre-partition, the Indian subcontinent was once a place of many kingdoms, rich in spices, fabrics, and jewels. The British first arrived during the 1600s with the East India Company to colonize the land, stealing its resources and wealth for themselves, growing rich and powerful by exploiting locals. By the 1850s, people were fed up with mistreatment. Peasants, workers, and soldiers alike took up arms against their invaders. But the rebellion of 1857, as this came to be known, was brutally stamped out by the colonial administration. Seeing how powerful a united group could be, the British implemented policies to divide the subcontinent's diverse, peacefully coexisting population, to prevent them from allying again and threatening colonial rule. These policies of divide and conquer are believed by many to be the underlying cause of partition. In 1947, British India finally achieved independence, but the British never unified the subcontinent. And so on it goes. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And then she ends the matter with her personal family story. So bringing it back from this larger geopolitical context into the personal and the emotional. And it's so powerful and it's so important. And, with the Queen's death, the Queen's recent death, and all the sort of, oh, the royal family's so incredible, and the royals this and the royals that. And I'm like, wait a minute, they have this insane wealth built on the misery of colonialism. So I was so thrilled to read that. I cannot tell you, it might sound a bit ridiculous, but it was like, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage to write that, especially in this political climate where, voices of color and voices that are challenging the narrative, you know, are being banned and shot down and attacked. I just thought it was wonderful. Shireen, would you share a little about Zara's? And was it scary for you writing that?
It was so painful because first I visited my mother in England and I wanted to hear her story in her words. So I recorded it. And as she related the story, and we both, I hugged her and she cried, and it was really hard. Then I came home to Chicago and I sat down to write it, and it was a very, very difficult experience. Writing this story was very painful for me. But at the same time, it was cathartic because I learned from other writers that they I got to know many Indian writers who told me their family stories, and they were exactly the same.
Wow.
In fact, one friend who's now a writer, she told me that her family left Lahore, and I was just imagining, they left Lahore, and my grandparents went to Lahore. They both left their homes, and it's just a really traumatic part of history, and I'm grateful that people are learning about it now.
Yes. And she's Hindu.
The friend, she is Baha'i, but her family
was Hindu. Really, really interesting, really powerful. And I just want to add to that a little. I'm in a book called Honoring Your Ancestors. And for me, all my parents died young. I had a lot of, you know, all my extended family um, were killed in the Holocaust. And so I don't have those family stories. And so I created, a sort of imaginary family of who I was related to. But one of the things that was important to me was to encourage kids to find out their family stories because then they find out real history, not just the stuff that's written, by mainstream people in, textbooks, but real stories. And so if you have family members that are still alive, tape record them, ask them the stories, they're so important, and it's also really healing for them, even though it's really hard. I shared a painting with some friends the other day, and it's a painting I did of my family when I was young. And I was so traumatized by, being a daughter of the Holocaust and, um, my parents dying young and all that stuff, that I would just, if anyone talked about parents, I'd just leave the room. And and if anyone asked what ethnicity I was, I would just say European in such a way that no one would ask further questions. And then I did this painting from a photo of my family, and I cried. I cried the whole time I was painting it. But then after I finished it, it changed. It changed something that was incredibly healing.
Right.
If we have time at the end, I'll share that. So I'd love you to share about Zara's blessing.
So I remember.
You want to grab the book and hold it up and show people?
This is Zara's Blessing, published by Barefoot Books, and the illustrator is Manal Mirza. And there's a really lovely story about the illustrator before I get into the story. When the editor at Barefoot Books called me, she said, we found an illustrator, and she says she knows you. And I said, how can that be possible? And she said, when she was 7 years old, you visited her school and read to her class. And that's why she wanted to be a book creator. So that was such a heartwarming story. And again, this is another story that I wrote in your class, Mira. Well, I edited it in your class. I actually wrote this when my children were very young. And the reason I wrote it was I wanted them to see themselves represented in books, and there was no Ramadan book, so I thought, let me write one for my children. And that's how it all began, but it was very different from this end product. It was told from the teddy bear's perspective, and I think that's the one that you critiqued when I took the class with you. I don't know if you'll remember because it was a few years ago.
You took the course more than once, didn't you? Yeah.
I took, yeah.
And I think it's really helpful.
I think that has helped a lot. So
just because there's a lot of materials.
Exactly. And the thing is, I felt overwhelmed the first time I took the class, and I thought,
say that, love. Don't say that.
No, sorry. You can, in a good way. Like I felt like there was more, and I needed to go back and keep learning and growing from that. So,
can you show some spreads?
Yes.
And what I love is that the book really shares a lot of Muslim values. And they're very similar to a lot of Jewish values, which is really interesting. And there's so much like anti-Muslim stuff that goes on. And if people knew, can you share like some of your favorite text and illustration?
I'm looking for my favorite illustration. I think this is probably one of the favorites when they because it just shows joy. Like when I saw this illustration of the celebration of Eid, it just gave me so much joy to see this. And that's what you want a child to see. I just imagined myself as a child. If I had had a book like this and seen Eid being celebrated, it just would have been so wonderful.
That's a great spread. It's a great spread. And it's also a book about social caring. You know, it's not just, a story. Like one of the things that we teach in the course is to find your underlying themes, your underlying meanings. What's beneath the story about, a kid that loses their teddy bear.
Exactly. And I know that, many people know that people fast in the month of Ramadan, but I wanted to focus on the things that may not be well known, like giving charity and giving to others. Those are so important, and I wanted that to be one of the themes of this book.
And Shirin has also put together a wonderful handout for you all about Muslim holidays and celebrations and rituals and different things. And if you're Muslim or you want to pair up with someone who's Muslim, have a look at that and see if there's anything there that you want to write about. Shirin, I love you. Thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for also having all these other books like Mindy's One Wish is Exquisite. She's another former student.
Beautiful.
Isn't it?
And then this one is just so much fun.
Halal hot dogs.
By Suzanne Aziz.
Yeah, I don't know her, but it looks great.
And then Manal Mirza is who illustrated Zahra's Blessing. She has illustrated this book. Cool. It's so bright and beautiful, and it's just filled with joy. Yes. And don't we want that for our children?
Yes, and Fifi Abu, another Muslim former student, has a new one out about hijabs. Mama's hijab. I can't remember the title of it. But it also looks absolutely wonderful. I need to get a copy. So, and then why don't you show the book that one of the things that Shirin did is she co-authored a book with two former students, Melissa Stoller and Kelly LaWarren. And
So one is planting friendship and building bridges. And these books are really special because I collaborated with Melissa and Callie, and we just came up with this idea that we want to just spread friendship and harmony and peace, and we want to do that through our stories. And so these books are about a friendship between three girls of three different faiths, and it's just a fun story about caring and sharing and community
and connecting through like specific symbolic objects from each of their cultures, which I thought was really nifty. And this was your idea, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, and it's such a great idea. It really is. So working collaboratively is also really fabulous, and I'm doing that more, and I'm just loving it. So, Shirin, I just want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for helping our students. Thank you for being a beautiful friend in my life. And I'm just so proud of you and happy for you.
Thank you so much, Mira. Thank you.
It's beautiful.
I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, gosh.